Hi, this is Simon Drew, and you're listening to the Walled Garden Podcast. This show belongs to the podcast network of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society, an international community of philosophers and seekers dedicated to the pursuit of truth, wisdom, virtue, and the divine, wherever they may be found. To find out more, go to thewalledgarden.com. But for now, let's caretake the gardens of our minds, one meaningful conversation at a time. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Walled Garden Podcast. So a few weeks ago, somebody who I've been in contact with quite a lot, a really inspiring young Stoic who is a football coach, also just a wonderful student and seeker of wisdom. His name is Nicholas Davis. He's been very supportive of the Walled Garden, been very excited about getting involved in our community, and he actually mentioned to me, he said, listen, I'd love to have this really great guy on the show. His name's David Casteal. He's a footballer. He's many things. Actually, I'll tell you a little bit more about David later. So anyway, I worked with Nick to get David on the show, and we ended up doing just that. We had a conversation together with David Casteal. And I actually want to read you Nick's little introduction that he did for David when we were introduced to each other via email, because I think that this really paints such a beautiful picture of just the vast array of experiences that David has had in his life, and thus, why this is going to be a very valuable conversation for all of us. So he said, Dave is one of the coaches I admire most. I'll remind you, this is coming from Nicholas Davis. He said, not only because of his strong coaching, but his incredible knowledge of the world and his constant learning and teaching never seems to stop. I'm probably only summing up 10% of what he has done in his life, but Coach Casteal played running back for the University of Alabama before coming to Spokane and imparting his wisdom through coaching high school football and teaching at an elementary school. So David Casteal, he also has a PhD in ethnomusicology, right? And he's actually studied drumming in Mali, Ghana, Guinea, and Uganda. David has traveled all over the world to learn, teach, and experience life. And Nicholas goes on to say that he's probably not listing about 20 more things that David Casteal has done in his life, but that gives you just a little bit of an idea of who David is, and just the breadth of experience that we're going to be drawing upon, or he's going to be drawing upon when we have this conversation. So I thoroughly enjoyed talking with David, and of course Nicholas. He does ask a few questions and jumps into the conversation. But this was just a really profound conversation with somebody who has real practical life wisdom to impart on all of us. And so I was really grateful not only to Nicholas for actually getting David on the show, but also to David for accepting the invitation and for having such a wonderful conversation with us. But before we do dive into the conversation today, I'm I'm really, really excited about what we've got coming up in the Walled Garden Philosophical Society, and I have to tell you about it. So I've been very busy with our team. We've been getting all of the events for the next 2 to 3 months lined up, all booked in. And so I want to tell you that just in the next couple of weeks, we've got some really great events coming up. Tomorrow, October 27th, we're going to be talking with Kai Whiting. He's going to be doing a bit of a conversation with all of us around God and the environment. Then on Friday, the 28th of October, we've got Massimo Pigliucci. I'm sure that many of you will know Massimo, but he's going to be talking to us about his new book, which is called The Quest for Character. And so we're going to be talking about the development of character, especially for leadership. Then next week on November 3rd, we've got a meetup run by Juan Perez, who is one of our contributors in the Walled Garden. He's going to be talking about how philosophy can drive meaningful change in our personal lives, but also in organizations. We've got Mark Vernon coming up on November 4th, talking about rewilding religion and spirituality. And man, there is just so much more coming up, including a very exciting event that I want to tell you all about. We do have on November 12th, Stoicon X Midwest, right? Now, two people in the Walled Garden particularly have been putting this one together, Kai Whiting and Scott Ballantyne. Many of you will not have heard of Scott yet because he's been doing a lot of the work behind the scenes. I can't thank Scott enough. He has just been such a phenomenal team player in the Walled Garden and doing so much great work for us. And so he and Kai have been putting together Stoicon X Midwest. And the reason is because Scott is actually the head of the Midwest chapter for the Stoic Fellowship. But have a listen to this lineup of speakers. We've got Gregory B. Sadler talking on varieties of religion and analogies for Stoicism. We've got Chris Fisher talking on Logos and Providence and God, oh my. We've got Kai Whiting talking on Stoicism for when the world is on your shoulders. We've got a panel discussion featuring Kai Whiting as the moderator, Aldo Danussi, Chris Fisher, Leonidas Konstantakos. I believe I actually should pronounce that Konstantakos. Okay, I'm going to correct that. Tony Long, Greg Sadler, and William O. Stevens. So they're all going to be in this panel discussion on, does traditional Stoicism have a place in our contemporary world? We've got Sharon LaBelle talking on From Despair to Meaning. And I'll be giving a talk as well, talking about rethinking Stoic culture, making meaning and community in a global context. So again, I want to thank Scott Ballantyne and Kai Whiting for putting this together. This is going to be a very exciting event. It's only about 2 to 2.5 hours you should expect. But again, this is coming up on November 12th. And the other thing that I do just want to quickly mention is that we have some exciting ongoing events that our contributors are putting together. And I'll share 2 of those with you now. So David Alexander, he's got the Prosoke Project. That's his grove in the Walled Garden. It's all about Stoic mindfulness, right? Focused attention on the greatest good. And so David is going to be bringing his wealth of experience and understanding on psychology and mindfulness and Stoicism to a series of events that are really all based around developing and practicing mindfulness in each of us. So these events are starting on November 5th. The first event is What is Mindfulness? Then on November 12th, we've got Letting Go of Judgment, and it just goes on. He's got some incredible events, and you can find them on the website too. And then we do have the Perennial Tradition with Joshua Bertolotti, right? And Josh is actually going to, as a part of the Perennial Tradition Grove, he's actually going to be running a series of meetups called Reading and the Good Life, Conversations on the Art of Living with Great Books. And so what Josh is going to be doing, this is going to be so much fun, in a kind of book club style. Every month, Josh is going to be having guests come in with him and focus on a particular book. So for November, and I should mention this is going to be happening at 9 a.m. PST California time every Friday with Joshua Bertolotti. So starting in November, it's going to be all about Christian contemplations on the meaning of life, focusing on the book New Seeds of Contemplation by Thomas Merton. So these are all just such exciting events that we really believe are going to help people to find greater meaning in life, greater peace, stability, especially in these wild times, right? We all need to come together as community in that communal learning, and so being strengthened by other seekers around you while you're learning these profound topics, these profound ideas and philosophies, really is just, it's so beneficial. And so we've had such a great time over the last year or so developing a lot of what we're now bringing about. And we're just very excited to see you all there at these events and to talk with you, to learn with you, to grow with you. And so, look, with all that said, you can go to thewalledgarden.com/events and you'll find all of these events there. We hope you do that. We hope you go and register, and we'll love to see you there. So anyway, without any further ado, I would like to present to you this conversation that I had with Nicholas Davis and the special guest of honor, David Casteal. I hope you enjoy. All right, so here we are. I should say before I start the conversation that the place where I usually do interviews, the internet is down today, so I am in my room, and in that case, a cat might jump on my lap halfway through. So we might have crazy kittens running around everywhere. But David Casteal and Nick Davis here, thank you guys so much for coming and joining me on the show. Nick, thank you for introducing me to David. I'm just going to start off by asking, how do you two know each other? Like how did you come across each other, and what's, Nick, maybe if you could say, why did you want to have David Casteal on the show today?
Yeah, so I know David from my high school days. He coached at my high school, and then my dad also teaches and coaches football at the same high school. So I've known him since even before I was in high school. And I know I've had conversations with my dad about David and just what an incredible kind of person he is. He comes back first day of football training, and you're talking to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I just summited Mount Kilimanjaro and this summer." So it's just things like that. It's just he has certainly a remarkable life and great stories, and I think a lot of wisdom has come from the life that he has. So I just try to listen to David when I can. I did the same in high school. I listen to him and take some of his wisdom. But that's how I know him from my high school days.
That's really accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And maybe David, I should probably mention for everybody who's listening on the podcast after the conversation. So I've worked with Nick a little bit in the kind of Stoic mentoring capacity. Nick recently wrote a really incredible dissertation, bringing together the worlds of kind of sports coaching and Stoic philosophy, which was a pleasure to read, a pleasure to take on that practical advice that he gives there. But David, I wonder if maybe you could just talk to myself and Nick, but mostly out to the void of the people who may not have heard of you before on the podcast. Who are you? What tell us about your life experience a bit.
Yeah, I grew up mostly in the South, in Florida and Alabama, and have always been very interested in athletics, and found that I was able to have some success there, not necessarily because I was a gifted person athletically. I think largely because I had some strong mentors and coaches in my life really early on, particularly in junior high school. A man by the name of Bill Wilson was very influential in my life in terms of an athlete and also a person and a student and a citizen. And so I had a very successful career in high school. I was fortunate enough to go on and play football in college. And after that, I spent some time in the World Football League that was happening in Europe at the time. And while I was in Europe, I realized that there was just so much more to the world than just this 120-yard football field. And it was while I was in Europe that I decided to, to try and do some other things, travel in particular, go on and continue my education. I finished my master's degree, and I pursued a doctorate, finished that, and then found myself in coaching and teaching. So it's been a very lucrative experience in life so far. Got a wonderful wife and a wonderful daughter, and I keep myself busy trying to live a life of service. I think is what I try and tell my daughter very often, is that a life well lived is a life spent in service of others. So I've tried to do that. Failed a lot.
I love that.
I've tried to do that. Yeah.
Of course. No, we're going to have to dive into all of that. There's so much that I want to ask you based on what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
You've very conveniently what would I say? Sidestepped telling us what those degrees that you got were, and I'm really interested in going into that because I know that you've got some really eclectic degrees, and I think that's awesome. But first, could you just remind me of the coach who you said mentored you when you were young?
Bill Wilson.
Bill Wilson.
Yeah, my junior coach, Bill Wilson. Yeah.
Now you mentioned that he was a citizen. You found him to be a citizen. What is a citizen to you? Because I've been really interested in this lately. Like, what does it mean to truly be a citizen in a nation?
I think a citizen is different. I think a citizen is different from a person who is of that country. So, because, for example, because you're American, and the definition that Bill Wilson used to let us know, talk to us about. You can live in America and be born here and be an American. You can live in France and be born in France and be French. But what makes you a French citizen or American citizen is this idea of enhancing those around you, and being a part of making this environment that you're in, this country, a better place. And again, that idea of service before self, being in service. So citizens are, he would say citizens are those who serve the people and other citizens around them. And that's kind of how, and he wanted us to be good citizens. And that meant being good fathers, good husbands. He had a strong belief in that. And I do as well. I've talked to Nick a little bit about this, that the things that you learn in athletics, they must be things that will transfer to other aspects of your life. If what you're learning about being a goalkeeper is only servicing you to be a better goalkeeper, then there's a lot lost there. You should be able to take those skills and those lessons and apply them to other parts of your life. I hope I got down to something.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And I think it's just such an important discussion that we need to have today, because I think there are many people out there who, like you say, are simply, maybe members of the nation, but are they really being citizens? I remember hearing somebody say recently that to live in a democracy is extremely difficult work because you have to do the work of a citizen. You have to actually be actively participating in your culture. Absolutely. To keep it from the potential, birds that would eat the good seed, you might say, on the field. I don't know if that makes any sense. That's just the analogy that came to me, so I'll throw it out there. But Nick, maybe if you have any questions around, sports, athletics, coaching, I want you to ask those sorts of questions. Then I want to get into these degrees as well, because I'm very interested in the music side of things as well. But Nick, I'll throw you in there.
Yeah, well, you say, living a life of service. And I'm just curious about how, for you as a coach in the athletics world, how that comes about in your coaching. What do you do specifically to teach your kids? I know you work a lot with high school kids and with younger kids as a teacher, but how does that, how do you teach them through sports to live a life of service?
That's a great question, and it's through the lessons. It's through the lessons that you teach, or the skills that you teach, that you're continually adding on or keeping that component of this this larger idea of what we're trying to accomplish here. So, for example, I have the quarterbacks is the position that I'm coaching right now. So we might be working and spending a bit of time on footwork, and I'll be going through what I'd like to see them improve on. And while I'm doing that, while I'm coaching that, I find there are always these moments where you can find an opportunity to say, I see that I see that we're working hard. I see that we're getting better at our footwork. Our stances are getting better. And this is because of the way that we're going about things. There are going to be times in your life when you're a husband or you're a father, you're in class, you're going to use this same approach that we have of getting our footwork better. This is the same thing that you're going to do. It's the same approach that you're going to use to take an assessment. It's the same approach, that you're going to use when you decide that you want to join the military, or it's the same approach that you're going to use when you decide, that you want to be a volunteer to help others. It's the same, kind of process. It's transferable. It's not just for footwork. And it goes back to, Simon, these things that Nick and I talked about, is that it's skills and things that you can control, and it's effort, and attention to, it's effort and attention to detail, is what it comes down to. Those are the things that I'm most concerned about, is that when they leave me, that they are better, a better football player, or more importantly, a better citizen, a better person, because of that.
Yeah.
Does that help, Nick?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's that's beautiful. I think a lot of times as a coach, we're so focused on, just the footwork, and we don't really think about how we can coach them in a way that they can take these lessons just beyond the football field or the soccer field. So I think that's just a really important idea to keep in mind. And
it comes from that idea. I'm so glad to hear you say that, Nick. It comes from that idea of preparation, like you said, of preparation and attention to detail, and the effort and making progress, so that you are eliminating. I talk about this often with students and players, eliminating surprises. I'd love to get both of your comments on this. I just have this firm belief that in life, very rarely are there surprises. We're happy, extremely happy. We're extremely disappointed or sad. But if you really look at it, I just wonder if very often are we truly surprised. The example I give students sometimes is, I say, did you watch the Super Bowl? Did you see how they were, how they were celebrating and hugging each other and cheering? I'd say, they looked very happy, very happy. I said, I bet if you ask them, they're not surprised. They're not surprised of the outcome, because they had prepared all along. So there is no surprise. I was talking to the coaches a couple of weeks ago, and I was kind of talking about this idea, and I said, to each of us, in this room who are married, when we asked our wife, to marry us, we were all thrilled. But Simon, were we surprised? And if
I wasn't
you
surprised.
You said, marry me. Yes. Well, really? Oh my God. Yeah, I was expecting that. I better get organized. But what do you think about that? Really, just really shocked. And on the side of disappointment too.
I think that's a really interesting point. I think and I'm also very interested in this idea that if you can prepare yourself, it's funny. This is an idea that even the ancient Stoics talked about a lot. They said that the wise person was never perplexed. So you might say surprised. because everything, because they
Okay.
expect everything, whether it's the worst of the worst to happen or the best of the best to happen, they kind of go out there and they expect anything could and may happen. And so nothing hits them in the face, It's like, I'm prepared for whatever. And this is why Seneca says, this guy, his whole city burns, all of his family die in this, in this fire, that everything happens to him that's terrible, that you'd think, oh my gosh, how does this guy going to go on? And he says, I have everything with me, because he knew that was a possibility in life. And he had prepared himself internally with the possibility of losing everything. Now, I know part of what you're saying is prepare yourself so that, you're not going to get to the end of a game and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we, didn't win, or I can't believe that we did win. I think it's very interesting. I don't know, Nick, did you want to?
Yeah, I think the idea of preparation too, in terms of when you reflect after the game, because I talk a lot about the idea of success on the sports field is not necessarily the winning or losing on the scoreboard. It's doing the best that you can do. And if you reflect after the game, even if you lose, and you realize that you prepared the best that you could prepare for the game, and you played the best game that you could possibly play, then you can walk off satisfied. Even if you lose, even if you're disappointed in losing, you can still be satisfied with your effort and with the game that you played. But that has to do with preparation, because even if you give a good effort in the game, if you think back to that previous week and you're like, well, I didn't really prepare. I didn't look at, I didn't watch the scout film. I didn't go in early to understand what the other team was trying to do or to get a little bit better. If you look at that and realize, I didn't prepare well enough, then no matter how good your effort is in the game, it's, that's part of being the best athlete that you can be. And in life, being the best person that you can be is to prepare for your job, to do the best job that you can.
Yeah. Through that preparation, I think it was Carl Jung who, I think he said, and I've thought a lot about this, because I've been involved in, certainly as a coach and a player, you're involved in a lot of losses, and they hurt. Certainly we know that. But he once said, he was talking more about coincidence, but I just used it for everything else. I think he said, if you trace coincidence back far enough, you will find the inevitable.
Sorry, you'll find the what?
The inevitable. He said, if you, someone said, I didn't realize that. What a coincidence. I didn't even think that would happen. He was saying, if you trace, that back far enough, there'll be a point where you'll see that it was inevitable. That kind of like what Nick was saying. That's the outcome. If you trace it back far enough, you're going to find the inevitable. Sometimes when we're, the place where I'm coaching now, and it is a close game, and perhaps Simon and we have lost, and everybody's extremely disappointed. And how could that happen? I can't, that, and it just seems so unfair. And then I'll come home and be extremely disappointed, and I'll start to think back and just trace it back, and sometimes, I'll say to myself, because here we play games on Friday night. So sometimes, Nick, I'll trace it back in my mind, just kind of working, and I'll think Tuesday afternoon, it's kind of when it started, that led us to not being able to do what we needed to do in this crucial moment. I'll think, Tuesday is when, this whole thing, led us to where we are. So.
That's such an interesting point. I love that. And I love that you're giving us this visual of how you work through it. And you're literally going back through every day. When did this begin? There's a great Jim Rohn quote that's kind of similar to that one from Carl Jung. He says, life doesn't just happen. Life happens just, meaning that everything makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, and even, and the first response to that I have is this visceral, like, well, some people just have it really crappy. And, like, obviously, like, some people have these experiences in life, or they live these lives that are just it's constant hell and pain. But then I think back to that biblical idea of the sins of the father carry through the generations, and you think,
That's right.
man, you just have to dig deeper to see, oh, wow, this is a generational problem. And this is just a continuation of life's natural laws that are going through. And maybe you are being affected by something that you had nothing to do with that happened 6 generations ago. Or maybe you're dealing with something that you do have something to do with. But I think it's interesting to explore that question of like, how far back do I have to go to see where this began? And how can I backtrack and then start getting back on the right track? And I think this has something to do with what you said earlier, David, as well. There's a really interesting thing that you were talking about when it comes to like footwork, and how the principles that you use when you're practicing your footwork will be the same principles that you'll use to be a good dad or to be a good co-worker, or, on all of these different levels. And something that Nick and I have talked a lot about, and he obviously wrote about this in his dissertation, is this idea that you've got to keep in your mind like the totality of the game when you're playing these great games. And you've got to keep in mind the end goal. And you've got to keep in mind, we want this harmony in our team as we're playing, so that we're not just individuals, but we are one thing moving in harmony, in tandem toward this objective. But then you have to focus on the particulars, and the particulars go all the way back down to how your feet moving. And that to me is just crazy, that you've got all these different layers, but you've got the totality, but you've also got the particulars that you need to rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, without which the harmony doesn't happen. Do you know what I mean? Well, obviously you do, because you've been coaching this your whole life,
That is absolutely the truth. There's this larger component, like you said. There's this totality of it, and what is making it, what is making it move and function in the way that you want it to, are all these small individual pieces. And then sometimes it's, your piece is just the footwork. Like you said, it gets down to, something that, that small, that contributes to just this larger thing. I never really thought of it that way. That's true. Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes and a tenet that I live by is from Nick Saban, who's the coach at the University of Alabama. But he's very big on do your job, right? If you focus on the small details that are a part of your job, if you can imagine the totality, the total team moving, if everybody is focusing on their small details and doing their job, that's going to create the beauty of the game and that big overarching structure that we want to move towards. And the same thing is true for humanity in general, right? If you can do your job in your community, you are, and if everybody does the best job that they can, if you just do your job and focus on your job, you're going to make your community better.
Yeah. Goes back to that idea of citizenship, right?
Exactly.
It is. That's absolutely true. That's interesting. I think obviously this coach, this Nick Saban, and he coaches at the same school that I went to, Simon, is that he's phrased it a different way. I like that. He was just do your job. When I was there, it looks like he's kind of taken that. When I was there, it was the same phrase, but what the goal was, and it was on posters and just around, and we all knew this. And we would often say this, or coaches would say this to us: do your 1/11th. There's 11 players, so say do your 1/11th. We're not asking you to don't do 2/11ths. We just need you to do 1/11th. Everybody just does. We would always say that. Do your 1/11th. That's all we're asking, to the best of your ability. Do your 1/11th, and then Nick, Simon, through that. I talked to the quarterbacks about this. Is this idea of, once I'm doing my 1/11, Simon is doing his 1/11, Nick is doing his 1/11, as I'm doing my 111th, one of the things that, I say, I want you to learn here and in life is that, I've got to trust that you two, both of you, are doing your 111, that you're doing it. I've got to release that, and that's part of being on a team. It's not so much, that you're focused in doing your part. It's the idea that you trust that other people are doing their parts as well. There's just take a moment. There was a moment in my life, and Simon, I'm not quite sure how much you know about the American sport of football, but we were playing, I was in college and we were playing this team, LSU, is Louisiana State's a very, very proud, very strong program. And the game was kind of going back and forth. And there was a TV timeout, I remember, and we were standing in the huddle. And this guy that I came to school with, he and I came in as freshmen and finished as seniors. His name is Greg Payne. And Greg had the play, and he was jogging onto the field, to relay the play to the quarterback. And as he was jogging on, I was standing in the huddle, and he pointed at me like this, and was pointing right at me as he was running. And and I'll never forget that. And what he was saying was essentially, do your 111. I need you to do this, in right now, and it's hard to put into words how sometimes sports, they give you an opportunity to carry the weight, and that is sometimes a privilege. Nick is a kicker, so there could be an opportunity into the game in which he gets the pleasure of carrying the weight. Nick, right now, need you to do your 111. And that's it. And trust the others. Yeah. So, sports can do that. I went out on a tangent. I apologize, but I just,
that's not
I think about that. That was a big thing at school, is do your 111. And I think she's around here somewhere, but I often use it with my daughter, with our family. There's my wife, myself, and her. And sometimes I've said to her, Ava, I need you to do your 1/3. That's it. I need you to do your 1/3 on this, just 1/3, and trust that mom and I are doing the other part.
Yeah.
So,
the thing that stands out to me the most in that idea.
She's living with me.
No, she's going to be a disciplined girl. But just what's standing out to me is it makes so much sense to say, do your 111th. And it makes even more sense to me to learn how you can trust that others are doing their parts, and to actually let go of that need to control everything and sit in your position.
That's the word I'm looking for. Control.
Yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for. Let go of that control. And trust. I would imagine that I've never been a kicker, but you could probably speak to this, Nick. I would imagine that as it's coming from the center to the holder, you've got to trust that it will get held.
Yeah, and what's funny about that is you have to start moving before the ball is being placed down onto the block or the field space. So you actually have to start your run up to the kick and just trust that the ball is going to be there. Like you don't get to just see the balls that's coming there and then you're going and looking at the whole time and kicking it. You have to trust that ball is going to be there, and then
and as Simon just said, the control. Because oftentimes you will hear someone say, Simon, in any sport, I would imagine you will hear somebody say, well, I didn't think that he was going to be there. I didn't think that he was going to be in his spot. So I decided to do it. No, so
yeah.
You hear that often. Well, I didn't think that he was gonna, I didn't think that he was gonna do it. So I decided to try and do mine and his.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Man, you're speaking right to my heart right now. That's exactly the kind of person I am. I'll just get in there. I'll just get in there and just start doing things, and just until it's done. And somebody else will be like, "Hey, that's my thing to do," And I was like, "Well,
yeah."
But
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if I could maybe ask you about your degrees as well. So you obviously you studied at Tennessee State. Is that the name of the university?
University of Alabama.
Oh, Alabama.
University
what am
of
I
Alabama.
thinking? Okay, I've got all my states wrong. But
yeah, hey, you're in the right region.
There's a lot. You're in the right area.
Well, anyway, the point is, I really want to know what are these other degrees that you got your master's, you got your PhD. I know that one of them is in music, the PhD, I believe.
Yeah, I did my undergraduate in I did my undergraduate's degree in advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, at that time I was still playing. I was still involved in football, but I had graduated early, and so then from there I got another degree in teaching. I thought I wanted to be a teacher, and the reason I did, Simon, Nick, is because I didn't know at that. I was done playing. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, and I talked to players about this often. Is I knew I wanted to do something that I felt would contribute to the world. I knew that, so I thought, teaching might be something that I would feel really good about. That I was, making my country a little better place and being a citizen. And something that I was proud to say, this is what I do. And from there, then I got a master's in reading for, a strange reason. I knew I wanted to get a master's degree. I wasn't quite sure what to do it in. And I chose reading because early on I really struggled as a reader. And I thought, what better way to tackle that, to maybe pursue a master's in it, and continue to teach from that angle. And then I did my PhD work in ethnomusicology, and I got a PhD on an instrument called the djembe, which is this West African drum. So I'm often telling people I know this much about us, about an instrument that big.
No, I love it.
I know a lot about this. I don't know a whole lot about this small thing. And Nick, especially for you, actually both of you, just starting, your lives are starting to get rolling. And I'm glad I did it this way. Is at the time that I was pursuing a PhD, there was a big push for Simon, standardized testing. You get a PhD or something like that in standardized testing, you could work anywhere. You get one in secondary curriculum. You could work anywhere. You could do research at an institution. You could do all these things. And some of my colleagues, were pushing me in that direction. You could become a superintendent of a school district. That's what you should be looking at. And I wasn't married at the time, and I just remember thinking, and it could have been foolish, we'll see, is that I wanted to make sure that whatever I got it in, it was something that I truly loved, regardless of what the outcome of it was going to be financially, or if it was going to bring me great success, again, financially, or a lot of accolades or attention. Because I thought, if somebody asks me, why did you get I'm just curious, why did you do your PhD, in standardized high level curriculum? Nick, Simon, I knew that I wouldn't have an answer for it. But I thought I wanted to make sure that if someone said, why did you get your PhD in, the djembe and ethnic music? I wanted to be able to say to my family I thought if I had a child, I wanted to say, I did it because I loved it. I loved it. And I loved it so much that I dedicated, this time and effort to it. And for both of you, it has not brought me, financial win. not even close. Not even close. As I knew that with this, with a PhD, working in the school system, I knew that I would go up on the pay scale, because if you have a master's, it goes, your pay goes up a little bit, Nick. And then if you have a PhD, it goes up, more. And I thought, well, at the very least, it'll go up a little bit, again. And so I went down and told them, you have to, Simon, you have to report it. You have to go in and say, hey, you have to show them the paperwork. Okay, I've got this degree, so I'm going to move up on the pay scale. And I remember what she told me, because I had some big plans. I was going to buy myself a new bicycle. But what happened is, because I had the master's here, but because I got the PhD, they didn't overlap. So when I got the master's, when I got the PhD, they pulled out the master's degree. So I was like, don't you get both? They're like, no. Once you get to the master's degree, once you get to the PhD, we no longer pay you for the master's. We pay you for the highest one. Yeah. And so it went up like $320 or something more.
Wow.
For like a PhD investment, which is, I don't know what, I don't even know what PhDs cost over here, but I know it's more than $340.
Yeah, it's more than it went up like that much. Yeah. But they pulled the other one, out.
But I have to say, as somebody who, so I have a bachelor of music, performance on jazz trumpet and singing, but I also play the didgeridoo, which is the sacred instrument of the Australian Aboriginal people. And so I know what it's like to fall in love with an instrument and to not give a damn about the financial reward of it's such a right. You just, it's more of a calling, to explore this instrument in depth and to explore playing it. And I think it's awesome that you have this. So you said your PhD is musicology of what did you call it again?
Ethnomusicology. So it's the study of ethnic music, and then you need to, for the dissertation, you need to have a focus. Yeah. And I chose the djembe drum, and it's and what it meant or means, meant to means. So that's the instrument. It would be the same thing as if you got your PhD in the didgeridoo. People would say, "What? Why did you do that?"
And I have explored that option, but I just haven't taken the leap yet.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe this is my good warning call. Hey, this is my. I'll explore it on my own.
It's only going to go up $320 or whatever it was.
I love it. Do you find that there are any? Well, I guess let me preface it by saying this. I'm very interested in, if you play sports and you play music and you explore philosophy, you explore spirituality, you bring all these things together. What are the commonalities between them? How do they inform your study and practice of the other discipline? And I just wonder, bringing your sports background into the exploration of ethnomusicology, which is so interesting. What I don't know, how did it prepare you for it? Or even did you learn anything about your sports coaching from your music practice? I don't know. I'm just interested in seeing if you draw any commonalities.
Yeah. Some of the things we talked about earlier, and Nick and I talked about a couple of days ago. This idea of practice, preparation, and then there's a large component of patience that goes along with it. And those are some of the things that I learned through athletics, that I learned from some earlier coaches, some of the things I try and pass on to kids that I'm coaching, is that when you start off with something that you're very interested in, for now it's now I've got this great fascination with the Holocaust. So I've spent quite a bit of time traveling through Europe, some different concentration camps, but that's all another thing. But what I noticed, Nick, is some of the same things, Simon, that I would bring to my preparation as an athlete. I noticed that I brought those same preparations to learning to play the djembe and study the djembe. Practice, a focused practice. Small steps. You mentioned the footwork and attention to detail. I spent quite a bit of time just working on. I'm left-handed, and they use a phrase in hand drumming, is that both of the sounds need to be the right weight. So because if I hit it as hard as I can with my left hand, and I hit it as hard as I can with my right hand, my left hand is stronger, so you'd get a different sound. And I know through what I learned through athletics is that first of all, that just working the right hand was not going to come easy, and that it would take, I'm sure you both could speak to this, it was going to take repetition, practice, and it was going to take a great deal of patience. And I learned those things from Bill. I learned them from Coach Wilson. I learned them through successes and failures as a coach, that you have to be willing. You have to be willing to sacrifice. You said you played the trumpet?
Yes, yeah.
And I'm going to say that if you have any type of skill level in it, and it sounds like you do, that you could point to many times in which there are things that you gave up for the trumpet. And here's the key, Nick, I think, and not that you gave up some things so that you could play, so you could play Wembley, or you could play the Sydney Opera House. You gave up things so you could practice the scale, and that's the difference, to give up and sacrifice for practice. It's easy to sacrifice, so that I could go to the big game, but are you willing to sacrifice those small things? I think are key, and those are some of the things that I've learned, and one has kind of, one's fed the other. I know for sure that the way that I approached playing that instrument, because I would go to workshops. I spent several years, there was a period of about maybe 7 or 8 summers when I was in Africa every summer. And I know that I approached getting better differently than other people did, because there would be times, Simon, Nick, where the master drummer had taught us something, and I would look for an opportunity during the day to kind of sneak away and then just practice, kind of breaking it down, because it was all it was all I knew. I know no other way to approach it, than.
I've just.
What about you?
Yeah, I've just got a word in my head that I keep thinking when I hear this, and the word is process. You've got to love the process. Everybody, like you said, everybody can sacrifice to go to the big game, or to play at Wembley or the Sydney Opera House. But you have to love the process and doing the process. And that's the small things. That's the footwork. That's practicing the drumming. That's coming out, in my own coaching experience, that's coming out in the dead of winter with ice and snow and just getting together and playing. Or the heat of summer. And you have to sacrifice things that would be easier or that you might want to do because you love the process of getting better. You don't necessarily, you love being good and being really, at the top, but really what gets you there is loving that process of getting better.
Absolutely.
Don't you think it also has to do with the fact that you mentioned this early, David, that there's this idea that maybe you want to actually really love the instrument you're exploring first. And I think that for me is, because I feel a little bit guilty when you talk to me about you sacrifice things for the trumpet, because I've actually told people before, I was never a big practicer on trumpet, right? But a couple of years ago, I actually went back to the first two instruments that I started playing when I was young. And those instruments were the piano and the didgeridoo. And I was not good at all on these instruments when I was young. And I wasn't good when I started 2 years ago. I just wasn't. I knew a few little things. I started on the didgeridoo from scratch, basically. But I knew that I really, 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 really loved both of those instruments. and so spending time on those instruments was not difficult at all. It was simply, I actually had to pull myself away and say, you know what, like, you can sit at the piano for 6 hours and not get tired. But some days I look at the piano and I think, I've got too much stuff to do. I'm too busy. I can't do the piano today. But that was like a lie I was telling myself. Like, really, there was so much meaning that I was getting from playing the piano. And when you start making that progress and when you start to see that, to me, the most important thing is that you learn how to love, or not that you learn how to love the instrument. It's almost like Harry Potter when he walks into the wand store and the wand chooses him. I kind of feel like if you can find the instrument or the sport or the exploration that chooses you, like, I really need to explore this. To me, the process just becomes so easy to engage with because you're so excited about doing it. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's such a deep love for it that, as Nick said, you're loving the instrument, and as again what Nick just said earlier is, through that you start to love the process, of getting better at it. You're finding great joy in it, and you're finding joy in the small successes and how you're moving up, incrementally. And with that, again, is that belief that what you're doing will prove dividends, at the end, that you're working towards this goal. And with that, and each of the things we just talked about, it's something, you're working towards something and doing something that you have complete autonomy over. You can control that. You cannot control whether you're going to be at the Sydney Opera House playing the didgeridoo, with the native, the Aborigine of Australia. You cannot control that. You can control, getting better, certainly. And that's one of the things I try and work with those. I happen to have four good young athletes. Very, they listen well. They express themselves, and they can articulate that. And we go over that quite a bit. Is that everything that we do here, and that we work on, are things that you can control. That we can get better at. These are all things that we can control. And because there are other things you just have no control over. I have no idea what the other, I can't control the other team. I can make some predictions of what they may or may not do, but
Yeah.
I can't control. I think that's really important. It's the same with your, I try to tell them it's going to be the same thing with your, if you have you get older and you have a family, there's going to be things in there that you can influence and other things you can't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
set yourself up for success.
Totally. Yeah. No, and this
Yeah.
is something that Nick and I have talked about a lot, because we talk about this idea of the dichotomy of control in Stoicism. And you can take that idea right back so close to yourself so that it's just like, oh my gosh, really, it all begins up here. Like, or that's kind of pointing to the brain, but it begins in it begins in our conscious choice, to be something different, or to do something different, to go in a different direction, in favor of the things that we actually have some sort of influence over, you might say, or control. Nick, I'm going to throw it over to you because, David, I want to be respectful of your time. We're coming up to about an hour here, but Nick, are there any questions that you haven't been able to ask that you wanted to?
No, nothing, super specific. I do want to, you told me when we talked the other day, David, about one of your middle school coach, and the quote he has about weddings. And I think that it's one of the favorite things I've heard. So can you just,
all right, give me that quote about weddings?
Can you just share that quote and just kind of like that's my approach to coaching. That's how I want to be a coach, but share that quote.
We were going through various drills. Again, I grew up in Florida. It's extremely hot, and it was a particularly taxing day. And I think we all felt like there just wasn't much, success that day, and we were disappointed. He was frustrated with us, and he would often talk to us about, being bigger. What he's teaching us. He wanted it to resonate through the rest of our lives, and he said, "Gentlemen, I measure success by the number of weddings I get invited to." And as
so beautiful.
Nick and I broke it. Of course, we caught some of it, but I think he knew later we would understand that. Just that idea of, I'll know that this was a success for you. I'll know that, that what I did had an influence in your life, because at some point you will say, as you're getting married, that one of the biggest moments of your life, I'm going to invite my 8th grade, tennis coach, because where I'm standing now, had a lot to do with him. I was telling Nick just real quick, and then please, let's close. I happen, Simon, to come from a very successful junior high program, if that's even such a thing, but it was a lot of really good athletes coming through there over the years, and he was the coach. And I'm not quite sure how it is in Australia, but here in the United States, if you receive some kind of a scholarship to pay for your athletics in college, it's called like a signing date. So and it's always in the newspaper. You sit down, you have this fake pen, you're not really signing anything, and then you're supposed to be signing the scholarship, and behind you is always the principal, because that person always wants to get in the picture. So it's the principal, generally it's the head coach, and it's your parents, and they're standing behind you, and you're at a table and you're signing the scholarship. There was a stretch of time when there was probably maybe 35 of us, over this stretch of years that we were fortunate enough to sign scholarships. And this is the absolute truth. Every single one of us, I'm thinking, there was myself, Reggie, Jerome, Tex, Leon. I could go on, I can just see them. Every single one of us called the junior high and asked if Coach Wilson would come over and get in the picture. Every single one of us, because obviously we're in high school, so the junior high's down the road, and we would all either drive by or say, "Hey, coach, I'm signing today. Would you come over, and be in the picture?" And he's in every single one, and I told Nick, I invited him to my wedding. Yeah, I did. Yeah, he was something. And I'll tell Nick, I think about this often. Again, this idea, Simon, of things bigger, is that all the things, I was telling Nick, all the things that we hated him for, and we hated him, the shoes, the socks, he went through how to put on your socks. This is how we lock a locker. This is where we put the towels. This is how you be a husband. This is what good dads do. And I'm 14. I'm 14. I don't have a job, so I don't have to worry about a boss. Why are you telling me this? So all those things that we hated him for, we love him for them now. We're grateful, for those things now. And I would like to think that maybe one day, someone will say that about me. When I was in elementary school, I couldn't stand him, but I'm glad I'm glad he taught me some of these things. But anyway, anyone else anything similar to that before we go? Yeah.
Well, I think that just
anybody, Simon, in your that way.
I think that sums up. I think sums up is the wrong way. No, it doesn't. I mean, it perfectly rounds off the entire conversation. And I just want to say, David, it was a real pleasure to meet you, and I hope we can continue this conversation at some point as well. You're such an awesome person. It's been a pleasure. And Nick, you obviously know that I think you're going to become just such a phenomenal coach. The way that you're thinking about these things as well it's so exciting to see your growth and development as well. And so, look, David, thank you for the time. And Nick, thank you for putting this together, mate.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. Thanks, Simon.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much, David. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation with David Casteal and, of course, Nick Davis. Thank you, Nick, for making the recommendation. I'm sure that you guys agree that was, there was so much value in that conversation. David is such a thoughtful, wise individual. And again, like I said at the start, such incredible life experience, and that shows. Look, before we dive off in the end of this episode, I do just want to let you know, go to thewalledgarden.com/events and make sure you register for the upcoming Stoicon X coming up on the 12th of November. It's going to be a really exciting event, as I said at the start, with some incredible guests. And also, while you're there, register for tomorrow's event and Friday's event, where we're going to be speaking tomorrow with Kai Whiting about God and the environment, and then on Friday with Massimo Pigliucci about the development of character. We hope to see you there. Again, that's thewalledgarden.com/events. And look, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great day. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Walled Garden Podcast. Remember that this show is a part of the podcast network of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society. If you consider yourself to be a seeker of understanding, of wisdom, a cultivator of virtue, then we want to learn and grow with you. Just head over to thewalledgarden.com to find out more. We'll see you there, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.